Welcome, Karl. Thanks very much for speaking with us on Blue Notes. You're the Bureau of Meteorology of Victoria's climate change expert. Now, ANZ's a bank, obviously, and financial institutions are being, whether they like it or not, drawn into the response by global regulators, the Financial Stability Board. There's also the climate-related disclosure regime, which actually is going to be quite a firm set of signals and regulation for financial institutions, and that will directly drive behaviour, I take it.
Yeah, look, when you talk to actuaries and others, they will talk about the TCFD, that Task Force for Climate-Related Financial Disclosure, driving as much change as the Paris Agreement itself. So the Paris Agreement, where countries around the world have agreed to limit their future emissions, we think that the signal to the market through the TCFD and other risk frameworks will actually drive just as much change.
And those signals to market, we're talking about investors choosing to invest or not invest, financiers choosing how much they will charge for funding, if they'll fund it all. That's the sort of things?
I think the first step is actually just understanding our vulnerabilities and what the risks are. So that first step of mapping out, well, if the climate system is changing, if the economy is changing in response to that, what are our points of vulnerability to that change? It's a pretty good first exercise. I don't think we're getting it too far ahead of ourselves, but certainly companies are thinking then, what does that mean for my operational environment? What does that mean for my investment portfolio? What does that mean for my duty to shareholders as well?
And when we look around the world, Australia, even though it stands to be affected by climate change quite dramatically, is perhaps not quite as advanced as Europe in adapting and taking on some of these measures?
I think Europe probably moved a little bit earlier than Australia in regulating around risks to the economy. So that means that the science institutions that are there in Europe probably have a little bit of a head start in what sort of data and knowledge they provide to the finance sector, for example. We're not far behind, and we have pretty good capability in Australia. We've got a whole continent of hazards to understand our vulnerability. We've got pretty strong science institutions in CSIRO, the universities and the Bureau of Meteorology, and we have a close connection between the big four banks and others in the finance sector here. So while we've started a little bit behind, I think the capacity for us to catch up and lead the world in this area is probably there.
So are you optimistic then about our response to climate change and how the economy can adapt?
I think I'm more optimistic than I was a few years ago. Seeing the changes in the companies that I go and speak to, seeing the changing appreciation of the risk itself, and seeing generally a lot of concern and will to actually account for climate change is something that's shifted me towards a more optimistic footing, I think.
And this is at operational level, management level, executive board level, right?
All levels, and including government as well. There's this growing appreciation that, well, some of these changes have reasonable predictability in them as far as risk goes. Risk is, by its nature, you're trying to imagine the future, you're trying to imagine changes in the future that you haven't experienced in the past. There's a bit of predictability driven by solid science around what climate change will mean, and I think, everyone's now seeing that is something that they need to pay attention to. Because
obviously not just in Australia, but in a lot of areas, there's a political dimension to this, but the response of organisations and even some government bodies, in a way it's almost independent of what political decisions are made, I suppose, if this is what you're talking about.
Yeah, there's a degree of independence from that. So particularly if we're looking at the responsibility of company directors and others, I think that has an independence from government. There's also some global organisation around that, so it's cross-jurisdictional as well.
Well, thanks very much for your time. Thanks for speaking with Blue Notes.
No problem, my pleasure.